Employment Services. My name is Dale Verstegen, and I am presenting with Amy Dwyer. We are both with Transcend Incorporated. We are really happy to be able to offer you this foundation course on employment services. This is the first module in the 4-module series that makes up the foundation course, titled Core Values and Principles of Practice. This foundation course, along with a specialty course series that you'll hear more about in the course of this presentation, is funded by the Vermont Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. It's being offered to you in partnership with the Community College of Vermont. I mentioned the national certificate that is associated with this course. That is offered through the Association of Community Rehabilitation Educators, called ACRE. Upon successful completion of this foundation course, along with one specialty course, you will be eligible to receive this national certificate. The foundation course is designed to provide you with the strategies and skills associated with providing employment services to any type of job seeker. The specialty courses that will be offered after completion of this foundation course are intended to give you those strategies and the nuances and challenges that are associated with very specific types of job seekers that you may be working with. The foundation course basically takes you through the employment process. The first course, or the first module, excuse me, is basically an overview. And we'll go into the objectives related to that to this module in a minute. Just want to spend a minute introducing both ourselves and Transcend Incorporated, who are the developers of this curriculum. Transcend Incorporated has been around for 26 years. We're a not-for-profit national organization based in Rockville, Maryland. We've been providing employment services for that entire length of time. We have 3 divisions. One is direct services, which I just mentioned. A second is training and development, and a third is research, all in the areas of employment for both adults and youth with disabilities. Myself, Dale Verstegen, have been providing employment services and training on employment services for over 25 years. My background is in business, and so I tend to emphasize and conduct research and focus on the area of job development and employer relations. Very interested in that particular customer in the employment process. I will turn it over to Amy to introduce herself and possibly a little bit more on Transcend.
The last 17 years in a variety of roles, but always in some form of job development for a number of different populations of job seekers. I tend to specialize in the area of transitioning youth, 14 to about 24, and working directly with providing TA to college-based programs of young people with intellectual disabilities transitioning from high school to college to their careers. And I have done some work in developing curriculum and training and technical assistance. But I have spent many years just out in the field doing direct job development and placement for job seekers. So back to you, Dale.
Thank you, Amy. The objectives for this module, Module 1, are the practice of community employment. As I mentioned earlier, it's an overview on providing core values and principles of practice. We'll talk about philosophy and values of employment services. We're going to talk about community employment practices, the processes and models associated with providing employment services. We want to give you an employer perspective in terms of how they perceive the services and the program that we provide in the programs which offer those services. We'll talk a little bit about progressive employment, and we'll talk about the key roles that are involved in providing employment services, particularly what it means to provide a more professional approach by employment specialists when providing employment services to both job seekers and local employers. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to is in the course there is a specific folder labeled syllabus. And that syllabus for each of the 4 modules associated with this course provides these same learning objectives that are associated with each module. It also provides you with a cross-reference of the resources, the tools that are associated with each of the learning objectives within that particular module. The syllabus also gives you guidance in terms of completing the activities associated with each module, and the syllabus also gives you specific guidance in terms of the field-based assignments that you need to conduct and write up and turn in to the instructor. So we want to encourage you to review the syllabus best in advance of each of the modules, even before going through the presentations such as you are viewing now. It's a great resource. You can use that as a guide to kind of what you need to do next as it relates to each of these modules and successfully completing the course. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy to go through a social view of employment.
You know, think about when you meet someone in a social situation, what's sort of your first interaction? It's usually a discussion of who are you and what do you do. So that kind of describes you and gives you status. You know, if someone says, I'm a lawyer, if someone says, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, I'm a firefighter, you know, that gives people an impression of who you are and your values based on what you do. So you can imagine if you ask somebody who doesn't have a job, what do you do, and they don't do anything, where do they fall in that status? So it really is important. Your job describes who you are. It gives you some status in the community. It also is your social connections. Think about where do you meet people. Who are your friends? You know, for the longest time, you went to school with your friends. But when school's over, where do you connect with people? And for most people, it's on the job. So it does provide your social connections. It also gives us economic power. When you make money and you have some independence with your spending power, you know, that gives you strength within the community as well. It can determine where you live. It can determine what kinds of things you buy, how you get around. It's really important in establishing that. And with all that comes a higher level of independence as well. So I'm going to ask Dale for view of employment.
Yeah, Amy, one of the things that Rich Luking, who's our president at Transcend, going to be retiring here shortly, always talks about is work is good. And it's a very simple statement, but he's been very articulate about that in a number of his presentations. And I think if you take it at face value, a lot of what you just summarized in those bullets around social connections and economic power and independence really helps define that term. Work is good. It's important. It's healthy. It's something that helps make us who we are.
All right. Yes, thanks, Dale. And it leads right into our values and our beliefs as well. values are really the basis for all of our opinions, you know, the choices that we make, how we respond to situations. So think about take a moment, think about what are your personal values? You know, what does freedom mean to you? What does choice mean to you? How do you, you know, choose what you do every day, where you've lived, what's your community, you know, how you support your community, those choices. Dignity and respect from others. And how do you share these values with other people? And your friendships, all of your relationships. And, you know, so working is a part of that, and your community is a part of that. Your friendships are a part of that. So think about also some of the people that you work with on your caseload. Do they have the same opportunities in these areas of values and beliefs that you've had? What about people with more significant barriers to employment or really difficult life circumstances? Do they have maybe not as many opportunities? And when you're supporting them, are you keeping that in mind? Does your organization support people the way that they want to be supported? And when you think about your own values, you realize that your values may or may not always align with your organizations. So what we're going to ask you.
One of the things I just want to add to that, Amy, is that just from a personal perspective is, you know, my wife and actually most of my closest friends have all been derived from my working associations. It's just something that because I think we do have those same values and beliefs, I find myself being drawn to a lot of the folks that I work with, and it's definitely spilled over into my personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we tend to align ourselves with people who have those similar values and beliefs. So we're going to ask you to go ahead and think about that in the first activity that's a part of this module. Activity 1.1, what matters to you? When you pull up that activity, it's going to ask you what do you value, and to think, take a moment to think about your personal values. So there's 3 sections of this activity. We're going to ask you to jot down a list of what really matters to you, what you believe in, some of even what your dreams are. Then to take a moment to think about what you're doing for a living and how that fits in, because you're assisting people with significant disabilities find, you know, meaningful employment. Think about, are you helping them find an opportunity to live and work the way they want to, or are they living and working for the values of others? So jot a few thoughts down for that, and then talk about what is your personal goal for your job. What matters most to you in your career? What is it that you are looking to achieve in your career? So what matters to you most? So this is sort of a reflection exercise, and you'll turn that into your instructor when you're done with that as part of this activity. The next thing to talk about really is a concept called social role valorization, which was sort of formulated by the same man, Wolfensberger, who created normalization. And a lot of you might recognize that concept of normalization. And it's the idea of really creating a positive image for someone who's a part of a community. So what is recognized as normal in our society, and what can we do to, you know, create or support socially valued roles for people? And what's so strong in that is employment. How society views employment is significant to how somebody is viewed within that community. So when somebody gets up, goes to work every day as part of a community, is a tax-paying citizen, they are seen as a competent member of the society. So the concept of this social role valorization is to enhance a level of competency. And through employment is a really key way to do that. It also helps to provide dignity, respect, acceptance within a community, rather than, you know, historically, a lot of people with disabilities have been seen as outside of a community, not as a team member. And one of the strongest ways to bring somebody into the team like that is to be a tax-paying citizen who's contributing to the community and their form of employment. That is their sense of belonging. So it's part of our roles to, to give people the opportunities to have that voice, to play that role, and to participate in somebody's community. Our role as employment specialists is to help enhance that. It's to, sell somebody to the community as a value added, as a team member. So we have to keep that in mind as opposed to using language that makes somebody separate or outside of the community. It's using language, they want to get a job just like anybody else would want to get a job. It's for the same reasons, so they have the same outcomes, and to keep that in mind, not to make things separate in any way. So when we talk about community employment, let's look at some of the core values of community employment. So when you go out and talk to a business person, you don't have to say community employment because they understand employment is employment. They don't recognize that there's anything outside of that. But within our field, we need to talk about why is it so important to work within the community. The first concept is we need to presume that anybody who wants a job, regardless of level or type of supports needed, regardless of economics in that community, that if somebody wants to work, there is a job for them. So somebody who wants to work can. Competitive employment, that it occurs within your local labor market in typical businesses, and somebody is paid to do the job that in the same rate that somebody else would be paid. So it's competitive employment. The key here is consumer choice. So the job seekers that we are working with, that they lead the process, that they guide their own employment, their own supports and services, and that they're headed toward a career that they choose. That they are receiving the wages and the benefits that somebody else who would be doing that job would receive. That's key to fair community employment. That we have a strong focus on capacity and capabilities, that we don't focus on somebody's disabilities or the inabilities to do something, but focus on what's the capacity, what are they able to do, and how does that ultimately benefit a business. Key here is also the importance of relationships. And we talked about that, that relationship development on the job is an important part of how we fit in, and just making sure that it leads to mutual respect, that's appropriate relationships, and there's acceptance within that employment community. The power of supports is really key. Somebody can do a job, they might do a job differently through different supports, but the same outcome can be achieved. So understanding how somebody, and we all receive support, whether we get a ride to work, whether we have somebody who, watches our kids when schools are closed, whatever that is, we all develop our support. So it's understanding the support that every single job seeker, every single employee needs in order to be successful. And then, systems change. Some of the traditional systems for people with disabilities don't always support some of these core values. So making sure that we work within systems that achieve that, social role valorization, and make sure that somebody is leading their own decisions, making their own decisions. And that all comes back to that importance of community and how somebody fits in and how we can be connected and how many formal and informal supports are part of that community that someone can really access to be successful. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the first assignment that we're going to ask you to do, based on this. And we want you to compare your agency's employment service practice with these core values that we just went over. So, think about these core values, and then we want you to interview and get the perspective of your executive director or supervisor. So there are going to be a series of questions that ask about these core values and how are they like, how are they different in the answers that you receive from your supervisor, and ask you to write this all up. And then what action can you take maybe as an employment specialist to assist your agency to become more value-centered in those areas where maybe they don't align. And then once you go through this process, we'd ask you to turn this into your instructor as well.
Kind of a critical review of your particular program. It's really meant to kind of foster a discussion between you and the folks that manage the program. We recognize that those core values, those are some important things to strive for, and various programs, I think by their own admission, are going to say, you know, these are the areas that we're particularly strong in, and we think that's important for you to know. And then, you know, from the perspective of the folks that manage your program, your employment program, you know, what are the areas that they strive to improve upon, or to do even better than they have? And again, some of that comes back to the values. So we think that's an important discussion for you to have with your supervisor or director of your program. In terms of aligning your values, what we want to do is kind of ask the question: what are your agency's goals, agency's plan? What does your particular supervisor expect from you? And how do they know if you're being successful? How do they know if you're moving in the right direction? Those are the things that we think are important in relation to the things that we've already asked you: your goals, your values, your role, your responsibilities. So with that in mind, activity 1.2, what does your agency value, is a worksheet that we would also like you to pull down from the course, download, think about, reflect on that. What is your agency trying to accomplish? What are your supervisor's expectations? How does your job support the values of your particular agency? Amy brought up this notion of social role valorization. That's an important part of what you do for your community and for those job seekers, putting them in the most positive light possible within the employment community in your particular area. So we want you to kind of reflect on that. Our suggestion is complete activity 1.1, then a complete assignment 1.1, and then that would give you a really, that timing-wise, that would be a great time for you then to move on to activity 1.2. I do want to take a moment here and just explain the activities are designed to support these module concepts and strategies. They're meant to be part of the module presentation. So these are the sorts of things that if this was a face-to-face type of training, we would be doing these activities within the classroom, within the workshop that you would be participating with. Because this is an online course, we're asking you to complete these activities independently. The assignments are field-based assignments, so they're meant to be things that you would do, you know, as part of your job, as something that you would do literally out in the field, out in your community, working directly with, in this case, your supervisor, and later on in the course, you'll be working with job seekers and employers. In terms of job seeker rights and responsibilities, we feel very strongly at Transcend that it's both. That as a job seeker, they have specific rights that we need to honor and respect, but also that job seekers have real specific roles and responsibilities in the employment process. And depending on the job seeker, the more responsibility that we can give them. We don't want to overwhelm them. We don't want to be asking them to do things that they would struggle to do. But where they can be involved in the employment process, we feel that it's important to give them the opportunity to do so. With that in mind, in the tool folder that's part of this module, there is a job seeker and employment specialist statement of responsibilities. And in that document, we basically give you a tool to communicate and plan with the job seeker that you're working with. You know, helping them to understand, what the employment process is going to be like, what roles they and possibly their family members or others may have in the employment process. And we recognize that that's going to be different for each job seeker that you may work with. So you may have a document like this. If you do, we suggest that you look at this tool, this form that we've developed, and maybe it'll give you some ideas of things that you could add into that document. If you don't, we would encourage you to use such a document really so that it's clear from the beginning, what their role is, what your role is, what they can expect of you moving forward with the employment process. When it comes to their rights, we think informed choice, self-determination, and active participation are key to a successful employment process that involves the job seeker to whatever degree it is possible to involve them. What we want to avoid are those job seekers that periodically come stomping into your office and say, "Where's my job?" Obviously, in a scenario like that, there's an expectation that their getting a job is entirely your responsibility. So again, this tool, this document might help to kind of clarify who is going to do what.
Yeah, Dale, I just want to add, in a lot of the employment programs I've worked in, it's really, really important that everybody is clear up front with what is the process and who does what. Everybody hears that all at the same time, so you don't have those issues of, I thought you were going to do this, or I was expecting this to happen. So I think everything up front and clear about expectations just makes the process run smoother.
Right, absolutely. And also I think for parents or guardians to really kind of understand. And sometimes some of the work that you're doing on behalf of the job seeker is transparent to them. So they just see that time's passing by and nothing's happening. When in fact you might be doing some really important work, such as contacting employers, conducting informational interviews that they may not be aware of. So them understanding that there are some steps that they are not participating in are in fact part of this process. Also, I think kind of keeps those communication channels open. So yeah, thank you very much, Amy, for that. In terms of the employment process, what we feel is that this process or this slide, I should say, is probably the most important slide in this entire course. Why? Because it takes that employment process and breaks it down into very specific steps. And I would go as far as to say, and hopefully you'll get that out of this foundation course, is that there are sub-steps or specific things that need to happen even within these steps of assessment and career planning, marketing and job development, job acquisition, on-the-job training and support, and ongoing supports. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize is that, and why this slide is so important, is it's very important that an employment specialist be very aware of where they are in the employment process with each and every job seeker that is on their caseload. And suffice it to say that when you have a caseload of many people, you will be at different stages of this process with each and every one of those folks that are on your caseload. So being aware of where you are in that process is very important. So when you are considering where are you in that process, we can categorize that as either getting to know the job seeker and or getting to know the employer. And we define the role of the employment specialist as that person that's gathering key information in regards to both of those customers of yours, the job seeker and the employer. And if you see yourself as that person that's gathering that information from both parties, you can see that it's going to logically lead to that job match. And the job match is defined as that point in time when you present to the employer. One of the things that we see as one of the challenges for employment specialists, or putting another way, some of the mistakes that employment specialists make, is they get ahead of themselves. They're moving into job development when in fact they don't have key information related to discovery and assessment about the job seeker. Or they're talking to an employer, and instead of learning what the employer's needs are, they're in fact already at the presentation stage. So again, pay real close attention to what is the employment process that you're engaging in with each and every job seeker, and know where you are within that overall process, and know where you are within the specific steps of each of these processes of discovery and assessment, job development, job acquisition, and then ongoing supports.
And I think it's important to say right there that that's not necessarily a linear process, that you could get to one stage and learn something new and say this isn't the right job and go back to the beginning again. You know, so it's kind of, you don't master one and move on, master one and move on. It's a whole sort of dynamic process that occurs based on what you learn within each stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick example of that that Amy's bringing up is you believe that there's a certain type of job that that person's interested in. So you engage in assessment. You start to look at their skills and aptitudes in doing that type of work. And again, this might be a person with limited work experience. That's what they think they want to do. When you get at that assessment process, you find out that this isn't a particularly strong match for that person. So you've got to kind of circle back and say, what, from a discovery perspective, what other types of jobs are out there, and what other types of jobs might you be interested in? Another quick example related to Amy's point about that it isn't strictly linear is you go in and you learn from an employer the types of needs that they have, and you might have a very specific job seeker in mind. Based on the needs that you find out, you might realize that this is not in fact a good match, or the skills that you had in mind for that this person that you knew could do aren't matching up particularly well with the needs of that particular job. The person still might be able to do that job, but you have to assess further in terms of required skills and job tasks that the employer has in mind after you've done that informational interview. But do not proceed on to presentation, and sometimes we do. We move too quickly to kind of say, would you consider this person for employment, when in fact we should still be at that skill assessment stage in the process. So thank you, Amy. Those are some great points. Community employment programs. The key roles of programs that we all work with are focusing on job outcomes, creating mission-driven systems, aligning the dollars within that mission so that if there are a certain amount of funding to support those programs, are they going into the right things? So one of the things that we, example of that for aligning the dollars is, are we putting enough resources and time into that discovery and assessment process to find that uniquely well-matched job for an individual? Expanding relationships with businesses and supporting self-determination among the program participants. So again, you know where you are in that process, but it's in fact not linear. And what roles are the job seekers playing in helping to determine where are they in that process and what is the right job match for them? The community employment models that we engage in when helping folks get jobs out in the community can generally be categorized as competitive employment. And we define that as employment at a customary wage and benefits that is the same or similar to anyone else that might be in that particular job. Supported employment, where supports are provided within the workplace that supplement training and quality control when necessary. Customized employment, where we're realigning or restructuring specific job tasks that meet the needs of both the job seeker to be able to work within that particular workplace, but also that meets the operational needs of the employer. Self-employment is another model or option around employment that suits some job seekers based on their interests and skills. And then resource ownership, which is another form of self-employment, where specific resources, equipment, property that might be owned by the job seeker are brought to bear within a specific employment opportunity. Within the resource section of your Module 1, there are resources 1.2, which gives further definitions of these community employment models. Resource 1.3, which gives some additional information about customized employment, and resource 1.4, which gives you additional information and websites and links related to self-employment and resource ownership. I want to talk for a minute about best practices in community employment services. Again, best practices are those types of strategies or services that have been developed as we've offered employment services over an extended period of time that we have found to be effective. So support employment has come around since the late 80s, early 90s. Customized employment was a further innovation around employment as a best practice and has been developed mostly in the early to late 90s. Evidence-based practices are those employment services that are offered particularly targeting folks that receive mental health services. Transition school to work practices, which is getting a lot of attention and emphasis recently, are those practices that really help students transition from school to the world of work. Motivational interviewing, which is even more recent in terms of an innovation or best practice. And then uses of natural supports. Each of these best practices will be talked about in a little bit more detail moving forward. Support employment, it's defined as initially developed to meet the needs of individuals with those folks with more severe disabilities, where it was not practical to put them on a job in an independent manner. It was discovered that there are a significant amount of folks that can effectively work in the community, but would need to do so with more support than might be usual for other employees that an employer might choose to hire. It's an alternative to traditional sheltered and competitive employment models, and assumes that individuals, regardless of the nature or the extent and barrier of that employment, should have the opportunity and the support to successfully work out in the community. It allows employment specialists to modify jobs and to provide the training and support that they need to be successful. Typically with support employment, one of the things that we try to emphasize is that over time we would like to see some fading and or where those supports are either transitioned to natural supports or may not be as necessary over time once the person and the employer are more comfortable with that particular placement. Customized employment is defined as individualizing the employment relationship to specifically meet the needs of both the employer and the employee, and is developed to include such things as restructuring of jobs, can be used with self-employment, can be used where a person is really effective at certain aspects of a job description, and what we look to see is can those can having somebody placed into those types of jobs free others to do other things that may allow for more improved productivity within that particular workplace. Customized employment isn't intended to provide a job that just benefits the job seeker. Ultimately, when you're customizing a job, it needs to lead to improved productivity or some additional benefit to an employer, such as improved customer service. Evidence-based.
I'd like to point out, if you don't mind, I'd like to point out kind of the difference between customized employment and that traditional job carving. And I think traditional job carving, you would look at a job description for a specific position and go through and sort of pull out the things that, Johnny, the job seeker, couldn't do so well, so that you take that and just highlight the things that did match his skills, and then present that to an employer. And that kind of sends the message, when you say, well, he can do this, he can do this, he can't do this, but he can do this, this, and this. That sends the message that maybe you're not getting the best candidate, as opposed to customized employment, where you go in first and find out what really are the needs of that business, and then highlight all the things that Johnny does have skills to do that meet those needs, and present it as a solution to those, business issues. And that way there's none of the highlighting of anything that Johnny can't do. It's just bringing forth what the skills are that match those needs that you found out. And I think that it's subtle and it's semantics, but I think that's a strong difference that customized employment has, those strategies have given us. I think it's just a cleaner sell.
Yeah, and what I like about what you said, Amy, is it really is taking into consideration that other important customer, the employer, and making sure that that is meeting their needs. As it relates to customized employment, resource 1.3, there's a kind of a question and answer document that kind of gives you additional information about that. And one of the other resources that are available in the syllabus for each of the modules, but Module 1, is website links. And there's one there that's listed in the syllabus for Department of Labor, Office on Disability Employment Policy, which has some wonderful resources related to customized employment, and we would encourage you to go there. With that, I'm going to ask Amy to talk about the final, or these next two best practices around evidence-based employment practices.
In working with in the psychiatric rehabilitation field, they've done some rigorous research on what are some of the practices that are most successful. And there are 6 evidence-based principles for supported employment for people with what they call severe and persistent mental illness that are good predictors for positive employment outcomes. The first one is eligibility based on customer choice, that it's driven by the individual and follows their own career plan, based on their preferences and their skills and interests. The supported employment is integrated with the treatment. For a long time, employment was sort of put way to the end. Everything else had to be in place with someone who was having some mental health issues. Everything else had to be solidified before they could even consider looking for a job or working. And what was happening was people were never getting jobs. So I think the switch has been to add supported employment as part of the treatment, that getting yourself together, having a place to go to work, establishing a routine, being a part of a community is also part of the treatment, and finding that it's much more successful and people are able to then keep jobs and get get everything in place as they are working. In addition, that services are focused on competitive employment, really using their skills and having somebody get a job and get paid for it in the same way that somebody else doing that same job would, even though there's supports being provided, it's still a competitive position. Also, the rapid job search approach, the not waiting, that part of the problem was the never getting a job and waiting for too long was negatively affecting people who were struggling with some of these issues. So having that being an initial part of, their treatment and being focused on that as an objective up front has had better outcomes for people. And of course that it's individualized, that the job development focuses on an individual's needs, their skills, their preferences, because, as we all know, just because somebody has a label of a disability doesn't mean everybody with that label is the same. They're very individualized needs and supports, and if that's focused on more strongly in the job development, there are more solid outcomes. And then, of course, the follow along, and that's really key, particularly with this population, because the disability may not be obvious to employers. So the whole issue of disclosing, when to disclose, what kinds of supports are needed, and learning how to disclose because you do need a support is really key in the process, and not just saying, well, they got the job and they seem to be doing fine. Someone who has these long-term issues are going to need some long-term support in order to be successful. The next area we talk about is school to career transition. Some of the key factors there are work-based experience and paid employment are the key factors to success. In fact, I think the #1 indicator research has shown of success post-school in employment is having paid employment while still in school. So work-based experiences that lead to paid work while they are still being supported. And by paid work, we mean paid by the employer. So become a paid employee at a business. That really is the #1 indicator of post-school success. The things to keep in mind with transition is making sure that, these are young people and they're new to the world of careers, and but they still need to have a say in what they're doing and be self-determined throughout the process. And sometimes that's harder with young people because they don't have a lot of experience. So what can they base this on? It's trickier with employment specialists who work with this population in understanding sometimes it's just that they're a teenager, honestly. They're young and they have no experience. And this is the population I have worked the strongest with. And a lot of times the presentation to employers, disability really isn't the issue. It's frankly, they're a teenager and the myths that go along with, oh, they're irresponsible and they're too young, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that we really need to work with. So the more empowered they are, and the more they understand the importance of work and matching the skills that they understand. I mean, sometimes it's hard to ask a 17-year-old what they're good at. They don't know yet. So that part of the process in career development, there needs to be a much stronger focus on self-awareness and understanding skills in order for them to, be effective. Family involvement with this age group is very key. They still, live at home, are still part of the family. The families can be very protective of someone of that age. And the other thing to keep in mind is, matching with all the linkages are very key, because when youth leave the school system and move into adult services, those are two very different systems. And that will be talked about more specifically in the sub-module that talks about youth and transition. But they go from an entitlement system to an eligibility system. And it's really incredibly important that employment specialists working with this population work strongly with the family to understand the differences between those systems and what they're going to be facing in the adult services world. It's very different from the school system world. So that's very key. And benefits counseling, understanding benefits. The whole concept of Social Security and SSI and SSDI and how it's affected by work. There are some negative myths out there and misunderstandings about Social Security and when someone can and can't work. So benefits counseling as part of this process, as someone is transitioning into their career while receiving benefits is incredibly important. And it is a complicated system, so having a trained benefits counselor is also very key as well. I'm going to pass this then back to Dale, who's going to talk about motivational interviewing, which is a relatively new concept in the field. So Dale's going to cover that.
The ones that we've gone through so far is support employment and customized employment will be covered in more detail in the specialty course that you have the opportunity to take after completing this foundation course. That would be in the Developmental Disabilities Support Employment Specialty course. That's the title of it. There is also a second specialty course that is available to you, and that would be the Mental Health Services Specialty course, and of course more information on evidence-based practices will be discussed then. There's a third specialty course that's available to you, and that is on transition in school to work practices, and more detailed information will be provided as it relates to working with those type of job seekers. All three of those specialty courses, in any one of those three in combination with this foundation course that you're taking now will qualify you for the ACRE National Certificate that I mentioned earlier. There is a fourth specialty course, and that's working with TANF job seekers. Okay, back to motivational interviewing. As Amy mentioned, this is a newer type of best practice and methodology. It has to do with, and I think this is something that's been part of our work and a challenge for our work for a very long time is what do you do with those job seekers that lack motivation, where it just doesn't seem like they're interested and or they're stepping up when it comes to seeking and securing employment. They may miss appointments, the attitude may be bad, and what we're learning is that isn't necessarily an indictment on them. Motivation is a very complicated dynamic, interpersonal dynamic. There's a range of factors and circumstances that go into play, particularly compounded by the fact that a disability or other significant barriers are identified, and that the very thing that qualifies them to receive your services may in fact be something that is affected by motivation. So one of the techniques that's been developed is this notion of motivational interviewing, where you use a technique to work with that job seeker to explore a range of factors that are affecting their motivation. The interviewing process is intended to help them develop goals and a plan for how employment can become an integral part of their life. So it's intended to kind of not to cause judgments or to make assumptions about why a person has either a lack of motivation or a certain attitude when it comes to working with you or seeking a job. And it allows you to work with that job seeker in a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication, providing particular attention to the language of change in this notion of where are they and where is it that they want to go. And when motivational interviewing is conducted with a job seeker successfully, it strengthens that personal motivation and commitment to a specific goal, because those goals are achieved unilaterally. They're achieved mutually between you and that job seeker. And it elicits and explores that person's own reasons for change. So in a nutshell, when there's a lack of motivation, change is needed. And the technique of motivational interviewing really allows for those changes to be explored and hopefully eliciting a commitment for change, for moving forward, because they have more personal ownership of the employment goals that you are establishing with that particular job seeker. So an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion for that person is able to be achieved. The use of natural supports, key factors there is that they're supports that are typical, things that are out there as part of the workplace, and something that isn't provided by us as the employment professionals or the job coach. They may include a ride to work. It could be as simple as a word of praise or working with coworkers or supervisors to create a specific quality control checkpoint that might allow that person to learn and or grow within that particular job in a way that isn't being done by us as the employment professionals, but rather somebody that they work with within that workplace. The whole dynamics of socialization and helping folks, facilitating that notion that at breaks, at lunch, this person needs to develop a rapport and working relationships with their coworkers. Those are all covered under the use of natural support. Offers more and better assistance for the job seekers when they're in, or job employees when they're in those positions, and enhance that notion of integration and socialization. Our experience with what makes for successful employment, assuming we pay close attention to the job match and we're not putting in people into jobs that they really don't have an opportunity to be successful at because it's not a good job match. So assuming we're addressing the job match, what makes for successful placements really are those last two bullets, integration and socialization. So it isn't them doing the work, it's them feeling comfortable and excited about going to work. And that's where and why natural supports are so important.
And Dale, I'd like to add to that that it also is important on the other end that if somebody's really fitting in as a team member and their coworkers and supervisors see that, when an issue does occur of some kind, they want to take that upon themselves. They're a member of that team, and they fit in, and they will, more natural supports will come from that. So I think it's easier for someone to maintain their job when they do fit in, and all of their coworkers are want to keep them there, and will work hard to do that. So it works on that end too.
Great, thanks, Amy. So the next section is going to be on employer perceptions. That other key customer of ours. What do they think about what it is we do? One of the sayings that is out there is this notion of beg, place, and pray. And in one form or fashion, that approach in terms of working with employers is alive and well today within our employment programs. Sometimes that beg, place, and pray is subtle. In other cases, we've seen just an outright appeal by employment specialists to employers to, quote unquote, give this person a chance. They have a disability, please give them a chance. But it can be subtle. It can be something as simple as I want you to consider this person for this job, and when you don't provide that compelling information as to how and why they should consider that person for this job and how the placement of this person within that workplace is going to benefit that business, it's easy for that employer to then assume that this is something that they're doing under that auspices of charity or that idea of being a good community citizen. I'm going to help by creating this employment opportunity for this person with a disability. And in fact, from the research that we've seen, that strategy, that approach really doesn't work. The praying comes in when the job match isn't a good one. We put them in there, we hope it'll work, but we don't really have compelling information or evidence that says it is going to work. So that notion of, again, back to the role of the employment specialist, good quality information about the job seeker in relation to good quality information about the needs of an employer really takes us away from this notion of beg, place, and pray. What do employers want? They want relationships that help their particular company and the needs that they have. They're willing to pick up the phone. They'll answer your call. They'll meet with you if, in fact, they feel that working with you will benefit their company. Relationships that help meet an industry-wide need. We all know of specific industries that have a higher turnover. That's a very obvious example of meeting an industry-wide need where there's high turnover. Relationships that help achieve a community need that makes it a good place to do business. Some employers are really embracing this notion of diversity. They recognize that their customer base is diverse. They want their employees that make up their workplace to match and to be comparable to the types of customers that they have. And we all know that the community of people with disabilities does, in fact, represent a market for services and goods. What employers often get is an appeal to hire the disadvantaged, programs asking to hire a narrow category of job seekers. We've seen approaches where, do you have any jobs that are routine in nature? When something's routine in nature, they feel they have a better chance of being able to place a specific type of person. But that also kind of labels or creates certain assumptions about the type of job seekers that you're representing that we don't think creates the best and accurate image of the folks that you're representing. Programs that vary in quality. When that word is used by employers, they're mostly talking about the quality of the employment services that they're receiving. Are their phone calls answered promptly? Are they getting accurate information about what it is that's being proposed? Are they there to address and resolve issues after placement? Those are all factors related to quality of the employment services that we provide. In a nutshell, employers have told us they've had somebody come in and ask for placements, ask for work experiences, but they don't understand the why. They don't understand how this service is going to be relevant to them. They get it in terms of how this might benefit the folks that you are representing. They just might not see that from their perspective. It's a mixed bag. Employers generally, what we find is that they are willing to hire, but they're unaware of the resources that help them. And we don't always do the best job of communicating the benefits of those resources that we're offering to those employers. A lot of times they're confused about those resources and services. Well, what's my role? What's your role going to be? How is this going to work? When they don't get a clear answer as to how this is going to work and how it's going to be beneficial to them, they're back to confused and frustrated. They feel inexperienced and unprepared when it comes to working with our population. I mean, it's no accident that we have the ADA. The ADA is there because there is a natural hesitancy for hiring folks that are part of what they consider a protected class. So we have to overcome that. And because they don't have the experience in working with this particular population of job seekers, the effective communication and quality of the services that we have to offer are more important. And when they don't get that, you can imagine that that makes it harder for them to consider the hiring of a person from our population in the future. Employers say that they generally express affirmative and humane views about the notion. I mean, you get very few employers saying, yeah, obviously, we have no interest in hiring a person with a disability. But in fact, employers don't hire persons with disabilities. They hire persons that have the ability to do the jobs and the tasks that need to be done to allow that business to be successful. So with that in mind, as long as we can communicate the abilities and the resources that are associated with working with us, then they're interested. Their views are often negative towards certain categories of job seekers because, as we are all aware, there isn't just one type of person with a disability. And so one of the things that's important, particularly during the informational interview process, is that we understand kind of what their experiences have been and what their perceptions are, not of just people with disabilities in a general sort of way, but maybe drilling down a little bit deeper in terms of what kinds of experiences have they had with what types of disabilities. Other things that employers have told us is when they do have experience with community employment programs, and when it has been a positive experience, they're open to continuing to work with us. And so there is that chance of an ongoing, effective working relationship over time. And they're willing to exceed the legal requirements when it comes to accommodation. We don't really find that the fact that certain job candidates need accommodations is a significant barrier to employment. Like they say, they're willing to do their part. They just have to see how and why that accommodation is going to affect their business in a positive way. What they want, worker competence, and they want good quality service by agents such as yourself. Doing good is not enough, and you're going to hear this throughout this foundation course, is they're expecting a return on investment. So if you're new at being an employment specialist, what we're hoping is these activities, these assignments that you're going to be engaged in throughout this course are going to give you a better perspective of what a return on investment means for an employer and how to effectively communicate what that potential return on investment is for an employer. Other things that they say is that the programs that we have, some of the folks that represent our programs are naive, they're confused, they're anxious. When I see those three words, what I think of are new employment specialists, people that are just learning their jobs. So one of the things that we're going to really try to emphasize is this notion of a mentor. How can we support you? How can, when you're starting to meet with employers for the first time, how can you get the supports you need so that you don't be perceived as naive, confused, or anxious? So one of the things that we really want this whole course and this whole training series to do is to help you feel more comfortable in the work that you do. When you're not comfortable, it shows. And if you're nervous, the employer is going to be nervous.
And Dale, sometimes it's as simple as the language that you use. If you're using language that's very human services, or in the abstract, or using labels that leave the impression that we're from a human service agency, those are big red flags, as opposed to using the language that business people use. And sometimes it's as simple as knowing what the language is and how to say something in a business term so that they see you as competent in the business field. Because what you're trying to do is negotiate sort of a business-to-business agreement, not a please help us because we're in human services and we want you to have a warm, fuzzy feeling. That's what leads to confusion and anxiety on the part of a business person who feels torn with, oh, I should be a do-gooder, but I got to do what's right for my business. We don't want to make them have to choose between the two. That's not our goal. And sometimes
Absolutely.
That's what comes across, I think.
And also with that, which is this next bullet, is that notion of solicitation and us not being aware of their particular business and how they do their business. Those are things that do, in fact, give poor impressions of what it is we're trying to do. The best example I can give of that is when we're too quick to present what we think are the benefits of working with us, or if we're too quick to present a job candidate, when in fact we haven't learned and tied the abilities of the job seeker with the needs of the particular business. If they hear that you want somebody to work there, but you haven't demonstrated a good understanding of how and why this person would be a good match for that particular business, then they feel that you are basically just soliciting. You're just, you know, if this employer doesn't hire this person, if they tell you no, you're going to go just to the next business until somebody says yes. And we have to really kind of do our homework. We have to kind of learn the needs, and before we make any sort of proposal, any sort of decision that we're asking them to make, we've done our homework in terms of their particular business needs. So that's what this last bullet really emphasizes, and it was validated by the employers that we interviewed, is that when we do link to and address the needs, and we're offering something that contributes to the company's operations, they tend to want to work with us. Mm-hmm. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amy to talk about the current trends in business.
That you need to be aware of and match. And one of them is just that supervision training and employment can involve minor modifications. So it's the concept that somebody might do the job slightly differently, but come up with the same outcome. Everybody doesn't have to do the same job the same way, and that has nothing to do with disability. It's just using people's strengths. And in addition, when we talk to employers, managers tend to rate employees that we have placed as high as other workers in production and performance. And if you've made a good match and the skills match the needs of that employer, then this is the outcome you'll hear from businesses. And also the strategies and techniques used in our employment services can help other employees. It's that concept sort of universal design and making everything easier for everyone. And you know, I've had examples of where I've just gone through and had to color code an entire copy or entire room of forms for an individual because they were having difficulty reading. They were medical forms. You know, reading the labels for picking out the right forms. And once I color coded everything with a key, the entire office was like, oh, why didn't we do this? Years ago, I can never find my right form. Now I just know to get a yellow, a blue, and a green. So it worked for, you know, it shortened everyone's, made everyone more efficient in doing that. So sometimes, you know, there are techniques that just make a workplace run more smoothly. And using those for everyone is, you know, great. Other current trends are the support for all employees is recognized as an important investment. It's human resources and understanding that happy, supported workers equals productive workers. So that support is really important. In addition, diversity is positive. There have been some studies to show that 85% of workers entering the workforce in the future will be members of underrepresented and disenfranchised groups. That is a reflection of our entire community. And so those businesses whose workforce reflects the community demographics have a better job at reaching their customers and being more effective within the community. So diversity is positive. And in addition, many employers would rather provide their own training with the assistance and support. And if you think about it, it is a strange concept to offer a job coach that says, you know, I don't work for your company, but I will train your new employee. A lot of businesses say, well, what do you know about my business? We train all of our new employees. So go with that. That's the way that they, you know, it's the typical way they train. We should always match the most typical employment process. So keep that in mind when, offering an outside person to come in and train is often not comfortable for businesses. So what is it that employers want to hear from us? They want to hear that we represent motivated employees who are excited about working. Part of that comes from, we'll train people. We want people to do, the job for us that we train them to do. So it's more important that they're just motivated and want to work and have the ability to be trained. That's what's important. So if you have a motivated employee who's just excited about being there, an employer will love working with that. That these are candidates with skill sets that add value to their workforce. If you can show that they can positively affect the bottom line of that business, then that's a much stronger sell. That's what they're looking for. And they want business solutions that improve the company's productivity and workflow. So the concept of hire somebody because you'll get a warm, fuzzy feeling and you'll feel good about hiring this person with a disability, those warm, fuzzy feelings go away quickly if they aren't adding value to their business and positively affecting their bottom line. So that's really what employers, want to hear from us when we go in to sell. It's business to business. So really the main message should be about competence and quality. Competence of the employment specialist, yourself, as well as and quality of your services, as well as the competence of the job seeker you are selling and the quality of what they can provide. So, it's really a business-to-business partnership that you are developing on both sides. So I think that's really key. And I think a process that has been working strongly in Vermont has been progressive employment in addressing some of these issues with employers. So I'm going to turn it over to Dale, and he's just going to go over that concept of Vermont's progressive employment and how that is working with these and achieving positive outcomes as a result.
Pioneered in the state of Vermont. And so given that you are all employment specialists working in the state of Vermont, we're not going to go over this in great detail. We also have a lot of resources on progressive employment. Resource 1.7 is the progressive employment expanded definition. 1.8 is a desk reference in terms of the different progressive employment options. Resource 1.9 talks about creative employment opportunities, and there's a resource 1.10 which is specifically on the job training as one of the progressive employment options, and resource 1.11 talks about insurance issues related to offering progressive employment placements. It's designed to meet both the needs of the employer and the job candidates. And the key words I want to kind of emphasize on this bullet is it demonstrates skills and motivation. It offers business solutions, and it shows competence and quality. So the thing that I think really makes progressive employment an effective tool for employment specialists is that it demonstrates and it shows. And if you go all the way back to the beginning of this presentation around social role valorization that Amy talked about and the social views of employment, you can see that this puts those job candidates in the best possible light. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is that it's a continuum, so that, and remember we emphasized the point of know where you are in the process. So certain parts of the progressive employment process are really good for discovery and assessment. If that's the point that you are at with this person that you're helping to find a job. If in fact you feel that you have a good idea of the kind of job they do and the skills that they have, you're going to use other parts of or other options in the progressive employment continuum to work with somebody. When we have interviewed employers who have been involved with progressive employment, the word that we keep hearing is that it takes away the risk, that they feel that they have a chance essentially to try it. To try, and it's no small thing but they are able to really try working with you as the employment specialist as much as try in terms of working with a specific job candidate that you are recommending. So it alleviates concerns, and the other key point here is it's not just the concerns of the employer. It's also the concerns of the job candidate. One of the things that I feel real strongly about is that the hardest part of an employment specialist job is to meet with an employer that they have not met with before, take them through the job development process, and permanently place somebody within that particular job site. I think that is difficult for not only the employer, but it's also difficult for the job candidate, where progressive employment softens that and allows both to increase skills and confidence in terms of working together. And again, it removes those labels. Before, they might have seen them as a person with a disability that you're trying to place. After they're within their particular workplace, they see somebody that's doing a job similar to other people that they've already employed. And it offers a lot of flexibility in terms of where you're at, again, with both the employer and the employee. It gets your foot in the door, and it offers you additional tools to build skills, add work experience to a resume, and even develop additional professional references. And those benefits come even without a placement. So you can put somebody in for a work experience, a time-limited work experience, and you get these types of benefits out of that experience, and in a way that is a lot less risk for the employer as well. So what are those options? Practice interview, a company tour, a job shadow, short-term work experience or an internship, and on-the-job training, and then temp to hire. And you can see in terms of these options that the first three are going to be more aligned with your work with that job seeker around discovery and assessment. And the fourth one, short-term work experience, can either go either way. It can be part of your try it before you hire them, or it can still be part of that skill assessment that you're trying to achieve. And of course, these last two are more negotiation points that you can use, or strategies you can use when working with an employer so that both parties can try something out before that permanent placement might take place. The second assignment that we want you to complete for this module is to get that perspective of the local employer. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Field work, and we're going to ask you to go out and get some employer perspective. So we want you to get the name of, one or two local contacts that your organization has worked with and you've successfully placed an employee into their workforce. You either might have a contact because of your role, or you can get names from your supervisor or one of your local business account managers as well. And there's going to be a series of questions we're going to have you ask to the employer and have you write up the responses to turn in. First, just sort of, ask them to describe the role of the employment specialist that was, played during the placement of that individual. What services would you say the employment specialist provided to your business? What were the benefits of those services to your business? And, do you have any advice on how, you could even word it how myself as an employment specialist in training can better meet the needs of local employers? And write that up and turn it in. And, it's good to go right to the source and figure out, how could we better meet the needs of that customer? Because our two customers are our job seekers and our employers. And we tend to not right into, what is the role of the employment specialist and what level of professionalism, do you need to have? What are some of your key roles? First of all, communication is key. You wear so many hats as an employment specialist. You talk to so many audiences in a day. So how you interact with your job seekers, the family members, the employers, and then other key stakeholders is very key in success. If somebody doesn't feel like they have all the information, that can cause a problem later. So, communication is really strong. And to make sure that in your interactions, it's always respectful, always, non-judgmental, particularly working with families and, from different cultural backgrounds as well, going in completely unbiased. Also, and this might seem silly, but it does come up, dressing in a manner that fits the environment and the occasion. Dress professionally when you're going out to meet with businesses to, match their style. Because, it takes people about 15 seconds to make an impression of someone as soon as they walk through the door. And the number one thing it is how you appear. So appearance is very key. And then that all your recording of your reports and case notes, that they're purposeful, they're neat, they match the objective, they're easily understood because this is written record. And you don't want any misunderstandings in somebody's record. So I think it's very key in that area as well. In addition, identify strategies for using language that doesn't label our job seekers. Again, language is so important. And how we present somebody, how we frame somebody is really key in what kind of impression you leave as well. So we talked about that earlier. What kind of language do you use? Always using person-first language in your actions. A person with a disability, not a disabled person. Somebody who uses a wheelchair, not wheelchair-bound. There's a whole list of appropriate language to use. And discussing any sort of multicultural impacts and consideration in the services delivered. That can make a difference, certainly. What are the various roles of an employment specialist? I said you wear many hats. I mean, in a day, I've changed clothes, the things I've pulled out of my trunk to go into job coach and then go to meet with an employer and then meet with a family. There are many roles, and they can all hit you in a day. You're a presenter, often because you are presenting a job seeker to an employer. You're presenting the skills. That happens a lot. You're an advocate because you're an advocate for your job seeker. In employment situations, you're also an advocate for your business customers, both ways. You have to be a role model. You have to be a role model for your job seekers. You're dressing professionally. You're going to work every day. You have to be a role model for on the business side. Oftentimes, a coworker, somebody doesn't know how to talk to an individual with a disability. They're just afraid. They think, oh, I have to say something differently or stuff louder, And when you go in and the way you communicate with your job seeker, completely normal and let them see you are a role model for them, then they will emulate that type of communication strategy. So it's very important that you're a role model in that way. You're a referral agency for placement. You are an employer consultant when they have questions and issues, not even necessarily about one of your job seekers, but maybe ADA issues or something like that. You are a consultant to them. That's the role you play. You are a human resources specialist. You are finding their needs and matching them. You're almost like a headhunter in many ways. You develop jobs. You're going through using customized employment, supported employment, progressive employment to find and make good matches. You're an evaluator. You're evaluating business sites to see if they match with your individuals. You're evaluating an individual to find out what sort of skills they have. So you're an evaluator. Planner. You have to plan. With all this stuff going on, it's clear that you need to plan ahead of time, whether it's career plans or just your day. You're a trainer. You're training other people. You're training an individual to learn a new job. You're training them in certain skills, and you're training coworkers and supervisors on how best to work with the person you've just placed in their job. And often a counselor can be a counselor to families who are, nervous about this process, a counselor to a job seeker. For some people it's their first job, and a counselor to an employer or a coworker on how is this going to work best. So essentially, in a nutshell, you're a jack of all trades. The stuff that goes on a day, and it's funny if you're to look at. I always ask people to look at your job description. It doesn't even cover all the stuff that you do in a day because of all these roles that you could potentially play. So in summary, for Module 1, very clear employment is desired by everyone. It is, what defines us in our society. That your values need to align with those of your agency in some way, and that's a process to work through, with your company and with your supervisor. That our job is to create or support socially valued roles for the people that we support, so they are part of our community. We sort of have a mission is to assist the people we support to live and find fulfilling work so that it's meaningful for them. It's key to always know where you are in the employment process, where to start, what kind of activities do you start with a job seeker, depending on where they are in the process. And that each step in the process does have, different goals and different activities related to them. And you don't, as we said, don't master one and then you're done. You will go back and forth throughout that process. But there are different options or models of community employment that would best fit your job seeker and their family, and to keep that in mind. And that all community employment programs really must strive to be the primary source of employment supports. Progressive employment options reduce the risk for the employer and the job seeker, as Dale described, when agreeing to work together. It sort of, eases the stress and the anxiety up front for employers and job seekers, and, and take some baby steps toward a final job. And success for those we support really depends on the quality of our services that we provide. We are representing our job seekers, so we are creating the first impression with businesses. And we have to keep that in mind. That's a really important role. You will now take a quiz, or we recommend that you take it soon after viewing this presentation, so that the information is fresh in your mind. You are allowed to take it as many times as you want to get the highest score. So you can go ahead and do that and turn that into your instructor at the end of that. So, we thank you for participating in this Module 1 presentation. In order to complete this full module, you do have those 2 activities and 2 field-based assignments that need to be completed and turned into your instructor. The quiz needs to be turned in. That's also part of completion of this module. And participate in the discussion boards that are set up and related to the information from this module. So we thank you for your time.